Hello everyone, our topic this week was requested by The Tank Kid. We'll be going over the first civilization from the Assassin's Creed franchise.
Okay, so first things first. The first civilization, also known as the Precursors or the Isu, are the Assassin's Creed universe's version of that ancient, long-dead civilization that left something behind that affects the world today. In the Isu's case, these are actually several things that they left behind. Various pieces of information, prophecies, holographic messages, and scattered bits of technology, most notably a set of items collectively referred to as Pieces of Eden, with the various pieces of the Isu's legacy, physical or otherwise, usually playing a pivotal role in the Assassin's Creed games. As opposed to most ancient Forerunner-style civilizations, however, the Isu were native to Earth, rather than being aliens from another planet or galaxy. In point of fact, it seems that despite all of the Isu's incredibly advanced technology, they were not actually capable of space travel. If they had been, it's quite likely that the Isu race would still have survived to the game's modern day.
The Isu are an ancient race of highly advanced, highly intelligent beings that came long before the race of humanity. More on that in a minute. We don't know exactly how long their society existed, but we do know that it ended about 77,000 years ago. And we know of events, most notably including an Isu and Isu war, that took place up to a few hundred years before that. Considering their level of technological development, it's quite likely that they themselves had been in existence for several thousand years prior to this. Truthfully, based upon the time frame established from the fall of Isu civilization to the rise of modern-day human society, it seems likely that the Isu had existed for tens of thousands of years prior to their extinction, but that's just conjecture. Physically, the Isu are nearly visually identical to humans. Bipedal, normal-looking skin as opposed to having scales or something, hair, the works. If the depiction of the gods seen in the Fate of Atlantis DLCs are to be trusted, the Isu were, on average, about a foot to a foot and a half taller than humans, and often adorned with some form of glowing cybernetic enhancements. That being said, none of the holograms of Isu shown outside of the Atlantis DLCs are shown to possess similar glowing augments, and the holograms appear to be of a similar size to the humans they interact with. The same is true of a genetically engineered Isu seen in the comics, more on that later, who appears to be of a normal human height, and, being recently created, had no cybernetic enhancements.
While we're on the subject of the gods of Atlantis, the events from the Atlantis DLC take place primarily in simulations created by an Isu AI, or future-viewing Isu, that part gets complicated, who does in fact have those glowing cybernetic tattoo things. And as such, the reality of the in-simulation events are questionable at best, especially considering that the Isu should have been long extinct by that point, and the locales experienced in the game are expressly supernatural locations. Consequently, it seems unlikely that the primary events of the DLCs have anything to do with the Isu's overall story, despite more directly involving Isu, the gods, than most of the other games. The final Atlantis DLC release may change that, but for now, nothing has really happened in the real/present-day world.
Back to the quote-unquote real Isu. Delving beneath the skin, the differences between humanity and Isu become much more extreme. First, the Isu have a triple helix DNA structure, rather than the double helix structure held by humanity and most life on Earth. This is presumably the explanation for most, if not all, of the other differences between the Isu and humanity. The Isu have a significantly longer lifespan than mankind. We know specifically of at least two that lived for multiple centuries with no indications that this was abnormal for the race. The most notable biological trait possessed by the Isu, however, was the fact that they possessed a sixth sense, and probably not the one you're thinking. Isu possess all five of our senses, as well as a sixth sense they simply call the sense of knowledge. No, we're not making that up. The knowledge sense is both more and less nebulous than it might initially appear, however. The eagle vision power, for which the Assassin's Creed protagonists are known, is a much, much, much lesser diluted version of this sixth knowledge sense. By the modern day, most of humanity has trace amounts of Isu DNA, thanks to interbreeding of the species prior to the Isu's extinction. As such, all members of the human race can train to have access to eagle vision, but it generally only manifests naturally in those with higher concentrations of Isu DNA. Activating eagle vision is almost always an act of will that takes a certain degree of concentration, as evidenced by somewhat reduced mobility when the player uses it. The trade-off is that a person using eagle vision gains laughably enhanced senses.
They're able to determine friend from foe via colored auras. Auras can also be seen around objects useful to the user in question. With training and/or innate talent, some users of Eagle Vision have been able to mark people or locales in such a way that the person or object in question still radiates an aura when Eagle Vision is no longer in use. Anticipate and recall both where a person has been and where they're going, even if the user has no normal way of knowing such things. Some users of Eagle Vision have even been able to connect with birds, seeing through their eyes and exerting at least a modicum of control over the creatures. Eagle Vision is also something that those in the know can interact with in some way, as many times throughout the series, messages or markings have been left behind that can only be seen with the use of Eagle Vision, like invisible ink activated by latent genetic talent rather than heat. We have been expressly informed in-game by an Isu hologram that these varieties of Eagle Vision, even at their most extreme, pale in comparison to what the Isu themselves were once capable of. Meaning that, logically, all Isu had access to the most advanced forms of Eagle Vision we've ever seen, plus even more goofy Sixth Sense bonuses. Though it is worth noting that they were not all-seeing or omniscient in any way.
A little over 77,000 years ago, the Isu decided to create a slave race for the purpose of being a manual labor force. This slave race was humanity. The human race was genetically modified from a pre-existing lower species and changed into something more similar to the Isu themselves. In many ways, they were just like the Isu, but there were two incredibly important differences. One, the original humans did not possess any sixth sense whatsoever. They couldn't even train to access the much lesser Eagle Vision as modern man can. Second, and much more importantly, humans were genetically designed with neurotransmitters in their brains that still, even in the modern day, react to the pieces of Eden.
All pieces of Eden can exert some form of control or influence over humanity. For this reason, the pieces of Eden often act as MacGuffins in many of the Assassin's Creed games, with the series' two factions fighting over and sometimes with them. The Isu used the pieces of Eden to control mankind, and for some time things went as planned. But despite not being designed to be particularly intelligent or special, humanity began developing in ways that the Isu did not expect, developing culture, art, music, all considered expressions of a growing real society, and not something it was ever expected or intended for humanity to even be capable of. This unexpected growth was the first of three factors that led to the Isu's eventual downfall. The second was the fact that at some point the two species began to intermingle. Let's face it, arrogant, advanced species makes a race of slaves that can be forced into total complicity by genetic design, and this slave race looks nearly identical to their own. Anyone who thought boots weren't going to start knocking were stupid.
But this intermingling had yet another unforeseen side effect. The hybrids, or at least some of them, were, thanks to their Isu DNA, born with either a resistance to the controlling effects of the pieces of Eden, or with outright immunity. Adding this together with the fact that the humans were smart enough to be well aware of their status as a slave race, and the outcome was almost inevitable. Two human Isu hybrids named Adam and Eve, yes, stole an apple of Eden, again, yes, and began to lead humanity in a rebellion against their Isu overlords. This war lasted 10 years and consumed the vast majority of the Isu's attention.
Which leads us to the third and final factor that played a part in the Isu's extinction. The Isu were an incredibly advanced society. As such, they were able to detect and forewarn themselves of an unusually massive coronal mass ejection, hereafter known as CME, that the sun would release in a few upcoming years. Now, for the record, CMEs are a real and normal thing that the sun burps out on a regular basis, depending upon the solar phase we're in, because, yes, that is apparently a thing. CMEs can hit the Earth anywhere from once or twice a week to 3 times a day. As you may have guessed by the fact that we don't hear about this ever, they're generally harmless and deflected by the various natural protections of the Earth, though particularly strong CMEs have been known to play havoc with radio waves or damage satellites. The aurora borealis effects are actually one of the results of the CMEs. This particular ejection, however, the one foreseen by the Isu, was going to be on an extinction event scale. Now, had the Isu and the humans not been at war, they may have been able to handle things and save themselves. But as it was, the Isu devoted most of their time to the ongoing war effort, leaving only a small but brilliant cell of scientists to focus solely on trying to find a solution for their impending doom.
It is for this reason that we presume the Isu had no access to interplanetary travel. The easiest answers would have been to pack up, leave the planet, maybe even the solar system, and come back to put everything back together once the CME had done its damage. They knew the planet would ultimately be fine, it's just the things living on it that were going to die, Isu and humanity included. These scientists spent years coming up with one idea after another, each more hopeful than the last, but based upon their calculations, none of them would work. Ultimately, the best plan was a series of towers which, when activated together, would be able to erect a shield that would protect the planet and its inhabitants from the worst of the CME's effects. Everything about it was solid, there was just one problem. Building those things would take too long. They simply didn't have enough time. However, another invention they had made allowed them to peer forward through time and even interact with the future via holographic projections. With this device, called the Eye, they learned that long-term, humanity would survive, but that in the early 2000s, a second extinction-level CME would hit the planet again. So, they automated the process of building the towers and turned their focus to their more immediate surroundings, after seeding clues, holographic projections, and other tidbits throughout human history to help guide them to hopefully not going extinct like the Isu were about to.
All of that sounds wonderful and noble, but there was just one problem. One of the scientists, Juno, was still of the opinion that mankind should be controlled and governed, not elevated to an equality she believed they could never earn. In response to this, the other scientists locked her away in their lab, sealing her conscious into it. Because war with each other and humanity is cool, but killing your colleagues for the betterment of the world at large apparently isn't. Long story short, the CME hit the planet, devastating both human and Isu populations, and within a few centuries, despite indications inferring that the two species lived in relative harmony after the disaster, the Isu had gone extinct, their species unable to recover with so few of their kind left, though many interbred with humanity, leading to the proliferation of the Isu DNA we have in the modern day. Millennia passed until Desmond Miles, arguable protagonist of the first 4 Assassin's Creed games, became aware of the Isu, particularly Juno and her colleagues, as well as the towers and the once again impending threat of a massive coronal mass ejection which would devastate the planet.
Guided by both Juno and Minerva, one of Juno's colleagues who believed humanity was worth saving, not just ruling, Desmond eventually came face to face with a choice. In the time since the Isu's extinction, the towers had been completed, the defense was ready, the Earth could be saved. But, in that same time frame, Juno, her consciousness alive and part of the very lab where the Save Everyone button was housed, had rigged things such that if the defense screen was activated, she would be freed, and her consciousness could reach out into the technology of our modern world. Minerva assured Desmond that if he did not activate the defenses, humanity would indeed be decimated, but they would endure. She even showed him the likely future, where they would be led to rebuild civilization by Desmond himself.
Ultimately, Desmond decided to activate the defensive screen and save everyone instead, confident that humanity would find a way to defeat Juno, who had made her hostility towards humanity very clear. Desmond died during activation, a requisite fact he'd known would happen if he raised the shields, and Juno was freed. As it turns out, Desmond's faith in humanity would be well placed. Juno did free herself and wreak havoc for a little while, before, in the comics, eventually having an Isu body genetically grown and placing her consciousness into it. But, not long after assimilating with her new body, Juno was assassinated. Her body left inside of a building while it exploded. Not permadeath by media standards, but she hasn't shown up since. And her millennia-long plans of human domination were thwarted. The last of the Isu were gone once again.
And that's basically the Isu, the first civilization of the Assassin's Creed franchise. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like and maybe share it with someone you know might like it. If you have ideas for more videos in the future, do like The Tank Kid and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, be they lore or let's play, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
In the meantime, this has been True Masters and Morons, signing off. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to see more like it, hit that subscribe orb.
To see our last Let's Play, click or tap the link on the right.
For our last lore video, click the link on the left.
Thank you to all of our patrons for making these videos possible.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.